So on your spiritual journey, you probably heard about this thing called ego death, right? It might sound scary, like you're supposed to kill your ego and completely lose your entire sense of self. But that's actually a pretty big misunderstanding. Ego death isn't about losing who you are. It's about peeling back the layers of false identity and societal expectation we have picked up over the years. So why then do many of us feel we need to fight our ego or kill it? That's because there is this misconception that the ego is bad and we need to destroy it to achieve enlightenment. Believing this actually brings more harm than good. If you think that your ego needs to be eliminated, you might end up rejecting yourself. You might judge yourself for wanting basic human things like success, money, or even just comfort, mistaking them as spiritual weakness. Without a good sense of self, you might also find it difficult to function in everyday life. You don't know how to interact with others or have healthy boundaries because you don't know where you end and others begin. You might feel lost after your spiritual awakening. What's worse is ignoring or suppressing your ego driven traits or desires usually just makes them stronger. The more you fight your ego, the louder it gets. The goal isn't to get rid of the ego, it's about working with it and finding balance. Your ego has been in the driver's seat for a long time, but now it's time to ask it to move out over to the passenger seat so that your spirit can take the wheel. And ego isn't all bad. It's only bad when it's out of control, like you have a madman driving the car. Your ego actually have a purpose. First off, your ego acts as an operating system for navigating the physical world. It gives you a stable sense of self, which help you handle social situations, careers, and relationships. It also acts as a protector. Your ego keeps you safe physically and emotionally. It sets boundaries, processes information, and evaluates risk. For example, if someone hurts you, your ego helps you recognize when to step away or stand up for yourself. But of course, we don't want to let the ego's protective side go overboard and trap us in fear. We don't want to live in fear and avoid taking action because everything feels so dangerous. More importantly, ego is actually necessary for your spiritual growth. Without a strong sense of self, it's easy to get swept away by other people's influence, ungrounded spiritual ideas, or even harmful teachings. You'll not be able to use your critical mind to discern what's right for you. Even powerful experiences can feel overwhelming or destabilizing if you don't have a grounded sense of self. Your ego acts like an anchor, grounding your spiritual insights into physical reality and helping you bring your desire to life. When your spirit and ego works as a team, your higher self can inspire you, and your ego can help realize those inspiration into the material world. It helps you to do the things you came here to do. The ego and the spirit are not enemies, they are actually partners. So if the ego isn't something we need to completely get rid of, what does ego death really means? Well, it's about letting go of the attachment to the identities our ego creates. Think of it as no longer clinging to the stories your ego tells you or believing them as the ultimate truth. For example, every time you say, I'm Yongkang, I'm Susan, I'm Chris, and then descriptions like I'm introverted, I struggle to make friends, or people misunderstand me, these are just stories your ego uses to shape your identity. The problem is, these stories can be really limiting. They trap you in a specific narrative and stop you from reaching your full potential or connecting with your true nature. Here's a personal example. I used to believe I wasn't a good speaker. I told myself that I couldn't string words together to make them coherent. I even had this incident from university where I froze during a presentation, standing there, blank face, as everyone stared at me. That story became part of my identity and kept me from doing something my soul really wanted to do for many years, which is teaching and sharing my insights with others. Another misconception which I find it funny is people think that ego death will make you lose your personality. A lot of people think that once you lose your ego, you will become this super calm, Zen-like person who speaks very slowly and never get emotional. But that is not true at all. Sure, there might be true for some spiritual teacher who naturally have a calm vibe, or maybe there are times where we feel calm too. But for most of us, we are not like that. We don't speak like that in our normal life. That's just another identity created by the ego. But this time it's a spiritual ego. If you think you need to grow a beard, wear a white robe, or carry crystal to look like a spiritual guru, that's just replacing one ego with another. I found that nothing changed with how I dressed before and after my spiritual awakening. I still love to wear my graphic tees, shorts, and jeans. I don't need to dress like a yogi to feel or look spiritual. The truth is, your personality doesn't disappear after ego death. You actually become more authentic, more aligned with your soul's natural energy. For me, my soul's energy is kind of playful, giggly, and childlike. But for years, my low self-esteem and the mental story about how unworthy I was turned me into this serious, melancholy person. When I let go of those old story and peel back those layers of false identity, I felt so much lighter, more playful, and way more like my true self. At the end of the day, ego death isn't about losing who you are. It's about uncovering the real you underneath all those layers of stories. But peeling back those layers takes time. A big misconception is that we need to or we can force an ego death. And once it happens, we'll hit some permanent state of enlightenment. That idea can actually be very harmful. It can lead to reckless spiritual practice, unguided use of psychedelics, or pushing yourself too far without considering your mental and physical well being, like meditating for hours without food and breaks. Forcing ego death on yourself can cause serious psychological distress like dissociation or psychosis, or even a full blown spiritual crisis that does more harm than good. I prefer to let ego death arise naturally and only handle it when it comes. When it's time to let go of your attachment, you'll know. You'll feel like you will hit a wall. You will experience some resistance in letting go of what you find familiar with. And that's where you need to surrender and drop those stories. But the thing is, you don't just drop everything all at once. Ego death comes in layers. It's not something you do once and it's done. You experience it multiple times over a long period of time. I've been through 3 rounds of spiritual awakening, and each one had a specific theme. The first was letting go of my attachment to my job as my identity. The second was letting go of my attachment to social relationships. And the third was breaking free of my attachment to romantic relationship and patterns of codependency. Trying to let everything go at once can be super overwhelming and disorienting. It can leave you feeling like you don't even know who you are anymore, which can cause a lot of distress. That's why it's better to let things unfold naturally. It's way more manageable to slowly integrate the lessons you're learning rather than rushing towards enlightenment. And it sticks with you more when you slowly integrate the lessons. Ego death is also not permanent. You let go of one layer, your ego will always find another story to latch onto. It's basically like a transformer, right? Just switching from one form to another. This process takes patience and kindness with yourself. You have to peel back the layers one by one to get closer to the core, to the essence of who you are. But don't expect yourself to stay at your core forever. Your ego will always come back, but that's okay Because even just a small glimpse of your core is enough to remind you of what really matters. The next time you lose your balance, you will recognize and find your way back to your true self more easily. Enlightenment isn't some permanent state where you have no suffering. It's more about realizing when you have drifted from your center and knowing how to return to it. If we believe ego death is the finish line or a permanent state of bliss, we are setting ourselves for disappointment. When the ego comes back, it might feel like we have failed. This can lead to constantly chasing the next peak experience or avoiding the real work of integrating the lessons in our daily lives. The ego can be rather tricky and often works in subtle ways that we don't recognize. Here are 5 common ego traps that we need to be aware of to better understand ourselves and grow.